Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 12th Annual Rocket City Weather Fest. Today, we are very excited to have with us Mr. James Spann. My name is Adam Weiner, and I am one of the co-chairs for this year's virtual event, as well as the technical lead. We are joined by Shelby Bagwell, who is our AMS NWA chapter president, and she'll be moderating questions via the Q&A section. If you have any questions throughout the event, we ask that you please put them in the Q&A box that you have near the bottom of your screen. And we will take those questions after Mr. Spann has finished his presentation. And without further ado, I'll get started with a brief introduction for our speaker. Mr. Spann has served as the chief meteorologist for ABC 33/40 for 24 years and can be seen weeknights at 4, 5, 6, and 10 o'clock. James has been a television weather anchor for 43 years and is also the winner of the award for broadcast meteorology from the American Meteorological Society and Broadcaster of the Year from the National Weather Association. Without further ado, he will be talking to us today about the April 27, 2011 tornado outbreak and what we have learned in the last 10 years since then. So with that, I'll let him take it away.
Adam, thank you very much. Adam and Shelby, thank you. And thanks to everybody for watching. Strap in here. Get ready for a quick 1 hour ride. We'll go back and look at the super outbreak of 2011. A lot of things to talk about. The bottom line is I want to share some lessons learned that we have all learned and things we're still learning. But a few things about me. I want to talk about my background very quickly. I am from rural Alabama. This is bunch of folks in my family, a little bitty place called Chapman. And I bet you've never heard of Chapman, Alabama. It's in Butler County between Montgomery and Mobile. And as a young child, I grew up in Greenville, which is just up the road. That's the county seat of Butler County. Question is, can you find me in this picture? Can you find me? I'm that guy. And notice I had no hair back then. I mean, I've had no hair, I think, all my life. But I love living in rural Alabama. And my heart, to some degree, is always going to be for people that live out in the country. And I had a situation in my family where my dad abandoned me and my mom. And all of a sudden, life changed. This is me and my mom. And again, notice there's no hair here. But my mama knew that I loved Greenville, and she did everything she could that we could stay. And I stayed through the end of fourth grade. But as I started fifth grade, I would move to Tuscaloosa. And, you know, the one thing about this, and my dad never paid a dime of child support. We were broke. We were a low income, broken home family, and life was pretty tough. But you know, the one good thing about it is the fact that I learned how to work at a very young age. I became the man of the house at the age of 7. And I'll tell you guys a secret about James Spann. I'm really not good at anything I do. I'm really not. I'm just not. But I will say I will work harder than anybody else to accomplish a task or a goal. And that work ethic started when I was 7 years old. I had to work, and I've had to work all my life. I don't think I'll ever retire. I don't know how to stop. So, but we would move away from Greenville to this horrible sounding place, Tuscaloosa. I didn't want to go there, but my mom needed to finish a year of college so she could get a job and support us. We moved into a little apartment about the size of a bathroom near the University of Alabama campus. And again, I worked and worked and worked. And when I was in high school, I got a job at a radio station. And I think this is the only time in my life where I actually had some hair. I worked that little radio station in Tuscaloosa playing rock and roll music through high school and college. My first major was electrical engineering. But the other interest was ham radio. When I was 14, I got my ham radio license. So I've been licensed for 51 years, which is crazy. And I love weather with a passion. But moving to Tuscaloosa in the decade of the 1970s, you think the weather is interesting today? You should have lived through the 1970s. I thought the world was ending. I lived through the super outbreak of April 3rd, 4th, 1974. I volunteered that night. My ham radio gear was just part of me, and they sent me north during the super outbreak. And my first stop was Jasper, that was hit really hard, horrible tornado. And they put me at the little hospital, the People's Hospital, with my ham radio gear to establish a link back to Birmingham and to, so they could communicate. And once that happened, I mean, I was busy setting up that radio gear, but I looked around and I saw things I don't think a 17-year-old child should see, but I think I had to experience that for some reason to do what I do today. but I learned that you could do meteorology. I would go ahead and change majors and got a job at the little TV station in Tuscaloosa doing weather, went to Montgomery, and then here in Birmingham. That's me. And I want to say that was probably 1980. And I was the main weather guy in Birmingham. I was not good, not that I'm that good today, but it's been a long journey. And I've been in Alabama pretty much the whole time. I did have one little stretch in Dallas. I was transferred to Dallas back in the mid 80s. This is me at the CBS channel. But I came back to Birmingham. I was born in Alabama. I will die in Alabama. I'll be buried here. But maybe I've been here too long when you start seeing this stuff going on here. I mean, this is really disturbing. And let me just say to everybody watching here, too much alcohol can be a bad thing. But let's go to April 27, 2011. And again, I took out a lot of the technical discussion here on this event. I want to talk about the stuff we've learned in terms of the warning process. But for the weather dweebs, nerds, dorks, weenies on the call here, this is the 500 millibar look with this event. This was at OZ on the 27th or OZ the 28th. But you can see a strong negative tilt trough coming through with very strong wind fields. And at the surface, we had a deep surface low near the Missouri boot heel, trailing cold front. And all the parameters were there. And this was forecast days in advance. The Storm Prediction Center convective outlook, if you knew what happened, you couldn't really have done a better job of putting those risks out. And understand back in 2011, we had slight, moderate, and high. We just had the three levels back then. But everybody knows what happened. And let me just say this, the day before, we knew that all the ingredients were there. All the players were on the field. We didn't know what was going to happen. It's really easy looking back on an event, but even though everything was in place, you still didn't exactly know what was going to happen that day. But as it turned out, it was indeed a generational type event. And by that, I define that as about every 40 years. In Alabama, we had generational tornado outbreaks March 21st, 1932, April 3rd, 1974. That was my senior year in high school, the event I talked about when I was in Jasper. And then April 27th, 2011. That's about every 40 years or so. So it's happened before. It's going to happen again. But for those that are not familiar with the event in my state, in Alabama, we had 62 tornadoes on that day. And the next number is the number that's not acceptable. Nobody, and I mean nobody, should accept that number. In the weather enterprise, whether you work as a researcher, a practitioner like me, whether you're in the private sector, the public sector, and the public shouldn't accept this. 252 people died. I'm in the process of memorizing 251 names. The other fatality was an infant that was delivered prematurely at 6 months and didn't survive and did not have a name. But that's the important to me. But in terms of the event itself, we had really two rounds. We had a morning QLCS, and I don't know what guy invented, quasi-linear convective system. Back when I was a kid, we called them squall lines. But the morning squall line featured large areas of damaging straight line wind and embedded tornadoes. But of course, the core part of the event were the afternoon supercells. This is a map of all 62 tornadoes. And let me just say, we had 3 EF5s with this event. You might go 30, 40 years in your whole life and not experience a day with an EF5. We had 3 of these things and a lot of EF4s. The first tornado of the afternoon was the Coleman tornado. This is here. But, most people associate this thing with this one supercell. Everybody, if you go, say, to Chicago or Atlanta or Dallas and ask people about this event, if they remember this event at all, they thought, oh, that was the Tuscaloosa tornado. And true, this got a lot of attention. This is a supercell that originated north of Meridian, Mississippi, came right through the heart of Tuscaloosa, the western and northern part of Birmingham. Another tornado got down on the eastern side of the state, Ohatchee, Webster's Chapel. The supercell dissipated up in the mountains of western North Carolina. But what you have to understand here is the fact that, we had 62 tornadoes, 62 of these things. And what I'd like to do just very briefly is to share a little quick video. I don't like the canned videos when you're doing a live talk here, but I think it's important that you understand what happened that day. A lot of you know, a lot of you lived it. A lot of you, it's in your heart and soul like it is for me. But for a lot of people watching this, they probably don't have knowledge of it. And with the national media, they left after a couple of days. I think there was some royal wedding or something. And I'm not faulting them, but it really didn't get much publicity nationally, past a day or two. So this is a quick overview, and I want to come back and talk about the lessons learned, which is the point of this whole talk today. So this is a tornado emergency. This is a very serious situation. But again, that is something that you pray that you never, ever see. This thing looks like it might be over 1/2 mile wide, maybe up to 3/4 of a mile wide. This will be a day that will go down in state history. And all you can do is pray for those people.
It's just a nightmare that I know that I cannot wake up from.
It's controlled chaos back here, basically.
It was awful. It was the most scared I've ever been in my life.
About the time I got through the bathroom door, well, the back of the house was coming off. And it was a wild ride after that.
Hearing people yelling for help and not being able to do anything because you're the person that needs help too.
We felt the pressurization, heard all the windows implode, and then the next thing we knew, everything was flying around and falling in on us.
Within a minute of us going to the door and getting in the room, it hit.
I'm in my living room watching TV, and I look out the window and hear crashing, and I see the tornado over the corner of the building, and I knew it was coming right at me, so I took cover, did what I could, and the Lord smiled on me.
A few moments ago, I had an opportunity in Air One to observe the damage from about 500 feet, and to say the least, it is massive. I would estimate on a 3 to 4 mile stretch of the city, at some parts more than a 1/2 mile wide, we have utter destruction. We have neighborhoods that have basically been removed from the map. We have businesses that will no longer be able to engage in commerce. And we've got thousands upon thousands of citizens who have lost their possessions.
We had to go to the VA and identify his body. He had broke his neck and flew him out the back window. They found him against a tree.
I knew I had and I didn't know if I could get out, but I was sort of crumpled up almost in a position, and I couldn't move my legs at first, but that was just because of the debris. And
So weather sometimes a serious business. Thank goodness not a lot, but sometimes it is. And I don't think a lot of people understand the magnitude of this day. Let me just say this. I don't even this for 6 months after the event. I had to go through a lot of phases of emotion and grief. I mean, all people died on my watch. Didn't want to talk about it. We had the National Weather Surf Association annual meeting in Birmingham that fall. I had, usually James Spann's a bag of hot air. This guy's just yakking away. I just didn't have anything to say about it. But let me just share one thing. This is all that really matters when you look at an event like this. This is Josh and Carrie Lowe, and this is their newborn. The newborn was, I want to say, born the first week of April 2011. Carrie Lowe was killed April 27, 2011, and she left behind Josh and that newborn, Tucker. That's the name of the baby. Her last tweet is always haunting. We had morning storms that morning that knocked out power to so many people. And her profile picture is that newborn. This is where Carrie died. This is in Pleasant Grove, 1320 12th Street. Let me just say, I'm in the process of trying to memorize the names of everybody that died that day. It's very motivating to me. And understand there were many other family members gathered together at that house, and the other family members survived. But Carrie's life was taken. She was under the front porch, and one of these extremely heavy sections of the house fell in on her. And there was a frantic search to try and get her out of there that went on. But she was pretty much killed instantly. And by the way, this is Tucker, that little baby today. This is Carrie's sister-in-law. But it's a very sad story. This is Shane, Jennifer, and Ari Hallmark. They live in a small town in Marshall County called Ruth, Alabama. And I bet you've never heard of Ruth unless you live in Marshall County. The family was together in this house with many other family members. They were there with Shane and Jennifer's parents, Philip and Ann Hallmark. Ari's cousin, Jaden, was there. 5 members of the Hallmark family died at this particular location. Shane, Jennifer, Philip, Ann, Jaden all died. Ari survived. She was lofted. The next thing she knew, she was in a hospital, and she had an NDE, a near-death experience. She wrote a little book, To Heaven After the Storm, which is an amazing read. And I think it helped to heal her, and she's an amazing young woman today. This is Ari Hallmark. But I think out of all the stories, maybe the saddest one was this one. 5 caskets, 1 family. And again, I'm telling you that tornadoes affect real people at a real place at a real time. This is not a movie. This is not anything to celebrate. It really happens. This is Lauren Brown. Yesterday, Lauren would have been 31 years old. It was her birthday. She was killed at 31 Beverly Heights in Tuscaloosa. A couple of friends were with her, Danielle Downs and Will Stevens, and all 3 of those college students died. I have befriended Lauren's mom, Ashley Mims, and some of the family members, and I grieve with them. And when you learn more about the lives that we lost, these were precious people that died. Lauren was a student at Shelton State. She was about to finish, and she was going to transfer to the University of Alabama. She wanted to do sports on ESPN. This is Michael and Tina Forrest. I used to talk with Michael. Michael was brought down to Birmingham for a job at Southern Progress, and the 08 recession hit. He wound up working at a Publix in Lee Branch here in Birmingham. And I'm in that store all the time, and we would talk. And Michael and his wife, Tina, lost their life in Ohatchee on Lake Neely Henry on April 27, 2011. This is Angel Stillwell. And one of the things I do every day during normal times, I'm in a school. I love to do science programs in schools. She goes to Pleasant Valley. I've been in Pleasant Valley so many times. And she died April 27, 2011. This is the memorial that is there at Pleasant Valley School if you ever go by. But I just want everybody here to understand that we have to do better. We all have some work to do. And what I want to share briefly for the rest of this time, just some simple lessons learned in the 10 years since April 27, 2011. These are practical lessons for all of us, whether you're a professional meteorologist, whether you're a researcher, whether you're just, somebody in the public. And I will tell you right up front here, this is the biggest thing we have to overcome. A lot of people, April 27th, 2011, never, ever heard the warning. And let me just say this, the warnings were absolutely excellent. the men and women that worked at these National Weather Service offices in Huntsville and in Birmingham that served these areas, and in Jackson, Mississippi, the warnings could not have been better. Now, true, it's not that hard to issue a warning when you've got these unbelievable radar signatures and you've got these reports and you've got these things on camera and you can see them. But yet at the same time, it's still not easy. You think it's not easy. You go sit in a warning chair working at the National Weather Service and the pressure you feel on you, knowing that everything is keyed off whether you issue a warning or not. But they did an amazing job. But so many people never, ever, ever heard the warning. And we know that was directly responsible for a lot of loss of life. And the biggest problem, it's this siren mentality. I don't know what it is about the world today, but everybody, I say everybody, a lot of people, they honestly believe, they really do believe they're going to hear a World War II vintage air raid siren in their house during a raging severe storm at 3 a.m. And it doesn't work that way. And, I didn't really understand this in 2011, but it hit me the next year. We had an event on January 23rd, 2012. We had an EF3 tornado that tore through Clay and Center Point. Center Point and Clay are northeast of Birmingham in the Birmingham metro. And this is an article from AL.com. A 16-year-old Clay girl killed in this morning's deadly tornado, found about 40 feet from her home, still on the mattress from her bedroom in the family's home in the Steeplechase subdivision. And again, look down there at that bottom graph. What does it say? Her father said the family didn't hear the warning siren. I mean, come on. Are we still relying on these things here today? I don't understand that. I mean, I was so mad. And let me just say this. I don't even need to see Christina's picture. Christina Heichelbeck is the teenager that lost her life because of the siren mentality. For everybody that celebrates sirens and they think that's the only way, everything else, we don't need that. We've got a siren. You have no hope. Christina was brilliant. She was in the IB program in the Jefferson County school system. She was so smart and an only child. And her life was taken too soon. And let me just say one thing about this. I am not throwing her parents under the bus. Her parents are friends of mine, Daryl and Carol Heichelbeck. They're amazing, marvelous people, but they still hurt today. But they want me to share this. I mean, if they could, they'd rather be here on this call talking to you. I mean, James Spann's a bag of hot air, blah, 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 blah. But they want me to share this message, is that we've got to move on past these things. It is still a major problem that we have today, the siren mentality, the notion that you're going to hear a siren. And again, I was so mad. I was so stinking mad after Christina died. You know what I wanted to do? I wanted to climb up these poles, take them down and burn them. And then that you won't hear them because they don't exist. But what we've tried to do boldly is push people toward NOAA weather radio and their smartphones. You got to have two ways. And if you're, maybe you've stumbled onto this and maybe you're new to severe weather. For most of you, this, but if you're new to this, weather radio, that's the baseline, has nothing to do with a cell phone, nothing. Doesn't work on a cellular network. They're very reliable, and they're loud. Those suckers are loud. And if the Heichelbeck family would have had a NOAA weather radio, then Christina would be alive today. And then on your phone, be sure that wireless emergency alerts are turned on. Again, this can fail. Cell networks can fail. We all know that. Systems can fail. But we've got to have a better way of moving past these sirens. Number two, big lesson learned. And I'm talking about loss of life. Let me just say this. My job here, the reason I'm here on this planet, I believe, it's to mitigate loss of life during these type events. And so all of these practical points are right on that cause of mitigating loss of life. This siren mentality, it's got to go. It has got to go. But the number two reason people died, I think, that day, the lack of helmet use. And shame on me, because I didn't push that. I had an idea that was the right thing because we had an EF5 tornado in Birmingham, April 8th, 1998. And a good friend of mine, his 8-year-old child, Nathan Seals, died in that tornado. The whole family was lofted. But the ER doc said that Nathan would have had a simple bicycle helmet on. He'd be alive today. That was in 1998. I knew better, and I didn't push it enough. I did not. But understand, this is not just James Spann saying this. This is coming from a major research hospital in Birmingham. This is from UAB. And I'll say this, I call it my hobby is healthcare. I have served as the chairman of a board of a large hospital in Birmingham for 16 years. I know a lot of clinicians. I know a lot of ER docs, and they will clearly testify to the truth that everybody's got to have a helmet on. And if we're sitting here not telling people to do it, they're not going to do that. This is something you don't normally do. But most people that die in tornadoes die from blunt force trauma. And most of the really severe wounds come to the neck and the skull and the head region. And a simple $5 bicycle helmet, a batting helmet for kids that play sports. And the other thing, too, is not just for kids. My position is this: every human life is precious. I don't care if you're my age or if you're an infant or if you're 90 or whatever. And every human life is precious. So therefore, everybody needs to be wearing one of these things. And we just did not message that. Half the battle, it's messaging from all of us in the weather enterprise. I'm a little bitty spoken wheel. You've got all these private sector meteorologists on television. You've got the National Weather Service. And together, we've got to message this in some type of unified effort. And I'll just chase one rabbit. We've got to be on the same page when we're messaging. We will communicate the message differently, which is why people have a choice of their source. But we have to be on the same page as to eliminate some confusion. Here's another thing we've learned. People respond when they actually see a tornado or violent weather when they're watching television. Let me show you a radar image here. All right. So, a lot of people, that are watching this, if you're a weather weenie, a nerd, a geek, dork, dweeb, whatever, I mean, you look at that image right there and your eyes will roll in the back of your head. Your underwear is going to start flapping up and down your legs. I mean, goodness gracious, that is graphic violence you're seeing here. This is the supercell coming into Tuscaloosa. You see the hook, debris ball, velocity couplet. Let me say this. We did not have dual polarization radar in 2011. We couldn't show the correlation coefficient product that shows debris being lofted in those negative CC pools. But again, here, just an incredibly violent image. But you know what? Go down to the Dollar General in Andalusia or East Aboga and show that to people and say, what's going on here? To them, it looks like a bucket of spill paint. And again, radar is an amazing tool. It's obviously crucial. But we've got to move past that in terms of the visuals we show on television, because when people see that, they often don't do anything. Even though we try and message it, we do everything we can to let them know this is a violent storm. This is an emergency. You've got to do something now. They really don't believe it sometimes until they see it. So again, let me go back to the radar picture. And I think that's the one problem we have is a disconnect between the people in the weather enterprise and the people we serve. I've seen it over and over and over and over. We go to these weather conferences and, we go to these sessions and we come up with all of these ideas that we think it's the right thing for us. This is what we think it should be like, without ever going to talk to the people that we serve, which is absolute insanity. That's why I love to hang out in Walmarts, in Targets, and Dollar Generals. These are real people that are in the paths of tornadoes. And, a bunch of us pinheads, we don't serve ourselves, we serve them. And we have to do a better job of that. So again, you show that to somebody, yeah. But if you can do this,
the Southwest,
you know what they're going to do?
From high atop the Tuscaloosa County Courthouse. And again, we're going to stay with this.
Again, this is some of the video from live on television that day. And this is a camera that's on top of the Tuscaloosa County Courthouse. And let me just say, the guy that was in that room on that day, Jason Simpson, did an amazing job. I would not want anybody else in that room with me. He's brilliant. And I like to surround myself with people smarter than me. And you watch that coverage on YouTube, but Jason nailed it. But he was running the camera at this point. And this is the EF4 coming up on Tuscaloosa. And this is when it really started to click and people actually started to do something. And of course, the problem here, what's the problem? We're down here in the southern United States where we often cannot do this. This was an anomaly, an absolute anomaly. And what we have to do is remind people of that. And number one, most tornadoes down here are wrapped in rain. This is not Kansas. This ain't Kansas. This ain't Oklahoma. This is Alabama. And down here, with the precipitable water values that are so high, they're often rain wrapped. And we just can't do that. We can't. Even if you've got a camera looking right at a tornado, it's often just a big gray mass where you can't see anything. And that's a problem for us. And what's the other problem? Most tornadoes around here, they don't happen during the 4 in the afternoon. They can, obviously, that one did. But when do most of them happen around here? They happen after dark, sometimes after midnight. And you're trying to get lightning to illuminate a wall cloud or a tornado. That's a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. All the chasers want to come down here. I'm going to chase down here. It's a different world. But still, despite that, we have to do better in messaging. I see it over and over and over. So many television meteorologists, what they do, they get behind the equipment. They're not even on the green wall. And they're just showing radar for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, nothing but radar. And that's okay. We have to use it. But do you have any cameras? Do you have any volunteers with a dash cam or any people in the news department, any other meteorologists out in the field? And if you can get people out there in it and show that live, people will respond better. We've learned that. And let me just say one thing too. A lot of the stuff I'm telling you today, we really need to thank our friends in the social science community. We have to take an interdisciplinary approach to this. What we do is not enough. That's a big lesson learned here. Physical science, that's all I know. My first major in college was electrical engineering, finished in meteorology. I don't know anything about human behavior or social science, nothing. And yet here we are trying to get people to do something. And our friends in the social science community have really come alongside us and helped us. So many, I don't start calling names here, but you know who you are if you've worked with me over the years. But again, we have to do a better job of getting video from the field to supplement what's on radar because people just don't see radar well. Here's another thing we've learned. And this was a shock to me, but it's true. Most people today do not understand how severe weather warnings are issued. They don't. They really don't. In fact, I'd say if you go down to the Dollar General in Gordo or Brent or Opp and ask people, they think that tornado warnings are still issued by counties. They don't even know about storm-based warnings. So you think of James Spann, what do I always say on television? Respect the what? Polygon. There's a reason to my madness. All this crazy stuff that flows out of my mouth for a lot, not all of it, but for a lot of it, there's a reason because we've learned that people do not understand storm-based warnings. They honestly think that warnings are still issued by counties. And we've just done a sucky job of trying to explain this stuff to people. And again, I say we, forget we, I'm talking me. I got to point that finger at me. Here's a good example, couple of warnings. And again, you got the velocity couplets. You got one near Wedgeworth in Hale County, and you got one near Pondville in Bibb County. And there are the warnings. And so look at the polygons. You got that first polygon, the one farther to the west that clips a small part of Tuscaloosa County. So people hear that in the city of Tuscaloosa. They hear Tuscaloosa County. And what are they going to do? They're going to go through their plan. And for some places, it's complicated, like a hospital, for example. I understand hospitals and what happens when there's a tornado warning and other people. And there's no need to do that. There was never, ever, ever a danger in the city of Tuscaloosa here. And what does it do? It gives the perception of false warnings. We'll talk about that in just a second. And look at the lead storm up there. Same deal. You got a little bit of Jefferson County, Alabama in that polygon. People in the city of Birmingham are hearing Jefferson County. They're digging a hole thinking a tornado's coming. And there was never, ever, ever a risk for the city of Birmingham. We have to do a better job of explaining storm-based warnings and telling people you're in it. You are in the polygon, respect it and do something. And if you're not, it's okay. You don't need to do anything, but I'll obviously watch it, but you're okay. So we have to do a better job of that. And here's something else we've learned. And again, I promise I'm not going to go past my time today. We'll do some questions at the end, but I want to share a lot of these points. We do a very poor job of reaching certain people groups. For example, those that speak Spanish, where they just couldn't understand what I was saying. And shame on me for not reaching out and trying to do a better job of fixing this problem. We need to come alongside and partner with Spanish radio stations. Birmingham's the largest market in the country, I think, without a Hispanic television station here. But we've got to do a better job. Low-income families. We did a very poor job of reaching some low-income families. A lot of families cannot afford a $30 weather radio. They can't. And we did a very poor job. And again, all of the, weather people, it's easy to not understand. And so I'm so thankful when I see meteorologists and researchers going into the field and talking with people that are affected by these things. But we've got to identify these people groups we're not connecting with and figure out a way to do that. And for a lot of these people groups, it might not be traditional television. We have this multitude of, different platforms we have now on the digital and the social side. You get the Facebook and the Twitter and all these things, TikTok, Snapchat. What people group, where are they? How do you reach them? And we need to learn more about that, but we have to be better at finding some of these people groups. FAR was way too high in 2011, false alarm ratio. The Weather Service in Birmingham, I want to say their FAR was about 80 in 2011. 80% of the warnings were false alarms. And let me credit them. The Weather Service in Birmingham, they've gone back to basic science to fix that. Kevin Laws and his team. Kevin is the SOO in Birmingham, the Science Operations Officer. It's basic science. And part of it was looking at these high base thunderstorms. A lot of warnings were issued for, high base storms that had never produced a tornado here. And all of that was cut out. And they worked on how polygons are drawn up. And they did an amazing job. At one point, I want to say the FAR got in the 20s here. I never in my lifetime thought it would be that low. And I think in the weather enterprise, we all have to work toward cutting out these false alarms. And there's a little conflicting research. I've seen a few papers that say, oh, they don't mind false alarms. But here's the James Spann research and the Dollar Generals of the world. This is what I hear all the time. I hear tornado warnings a lot. I hear those things all the time, and nothing ever happens. Cry wolf. And when you've got an actual tornado and they hear a tornado warning, that thing, weather radio goes off all the time and the TV guys are always on there. We've got to cut that stuff out. And again, the work has been tremendous. And this is something that we're really starting to understand. We need to get the public involved in helping us. They are the most underused asset we have in the warning process. Joe Q Public. Because we know today we cannot reach a lot of people. Most people today, when they go home, they're going to plop down. And what do? They turn on the TV and what do they watch? Netflix or Amazon Prime. Do you think if they're watching Netflix, a tornado guy is going to come on there, a meteorologist, and tell them a tornado's coming? No. Back when I was a kid, you watched ABC or NBC or CBS if you're lucky to get all three of those channels. But today, the universe is just stunning with choices. You might sit down and watch, YouTube videos, cat videos, whatever. And that's fine. It's great that we have these choices, but we know that we don't have the reach that we used to have a long time ago directly on television in most cases. So when I'm talking about, the public being involved, this is the message. And if you watch some of the stuff this past week on Wednesday, I said, be a hero. You can be a hero. If during any of this coverage that goes on for hours and hours, somebody in one of these polygons, maybe a family member, it's a friend, maybe somebody you went to college with and they live there, do us a favor. You get involved and call them or text them. You've got to come alongside us. You have to be the wind beneath our wings, and you can be a hero. That is something we did not use in 2011. And boy, I wish we would have, because I'm telling you, this is absolutely critical. And a couple of quick things. We'll do some questions here. I want to go back to what happened this week, this past week on Wednesday, St. Patrick's Day. And we don't know how many tornadoes have touched down yet. At least we're going to wind up with over 24, probably maybe close to 36. But despite all these tornadoes, how many people died that day? 0. How many people were injured that day? To my knowledge, 0. You're going to go through that many tornadoes with no fatalities and no injuries. That's a sign that the lessons that we've learned are starting to pay off. The preparation leading up to that day. And the people were so good that the public, they were ready. They had those helmets. I probably got 5,000 pictures of people with their helmets on in tornado warning polygons. That message is getting through. The respect the polygon. They understand that counties are not, warnings aren't issued for an entire county. It's issued for a segment of a county. They're starting to get that message. They're starting to get the message that you don't need to rely on some siren. You got to get a weather radio. You couldn't find a weather radio probably within 500 miles of this place. They all sold out. So the message is starting to get through. And I think that's a sign of the improvement that we've seen here over the course of the last 10 years. But let me just say, too, we've got a lot of work to do. What happened 2 years ago down in Lee County, Alabama, it set us back. I mean, we were feeling pretty good. We had the tornado in Jacksonville, Alabama. Happened 3 years ago yesterday. An EF3 came through a pretty good little population center. We had no loss of life. We were feeling good about the improvements we made in the warning process, but then Lee County hit in 2019. 23 people died, took our breath away. Precious people, just like April 27, 2011. But on that deal, the biggest problem was what? People live in mobile homes. And that's a whole nother section for another day we'll talk about later. There's some great people in this state doing research on that problem, but within my state here, we do have a lot of folks that live in manufactured housing away from municipalities. Great affordable housing, but 19 of the 23 people down there lost their life in mobile homes. My personal opinion, chasing another rabbit here, I think in the weather enterprise, we need to come up with a product between a watch and a warning for people that live in mobile homes. And I'm trying to be cognizant of this when I'm on the air and these long hours of coverage and try and give them a clue as to when they need to go. But again, we can celebrate the fact that we had no loss of life with the event this past week. So I think all of this is starting to happen. A couple more quick things. We'll do some questions and answers. I've talked way too long. Research has shown that if you go past 30 minutes on a Zoom call, people will fall asleep on you. This is a selfish personal plug. I've got a book I've written, and I'm not talking much about it. And this is, by the way, the cover will not look like this. This was just a demo. But the book is called All You Can Do Is Pray. And I said that on the air. I don't even remember saying that on the air, but I did because you can watch the replay. But at some point I said, all you can do is pray for these people. But it's about the science of the day. I wanted to document that. But I wanted to document a lot of stories, especially untold stories. If I didn't write this book, I would be haunted every day for the rest of my life. And trust me, if you know me, I do not have time to write a book. I have not slept since 1973. I'm sleeping like 3 hours a night during the week, which is not good. But I felt very strongly compelled to write this and mainly to document some things. I wish we had a book like this after April 3rd, 1974, after March 21st, 1932. The next time we have a day like this, I'll be at the cemetery. But anyway, that will be released in about 1 month. Mid-April. And if you need to get me, I'm on the Twitter, the Gram, everything else. So at this point, I'll stop. I've gone 46 minutes, which is way too long. So we'll go to the question and answers segment here, which is always fun. So Adam or Shelby, I think Shelby, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Spann. We have one question in the chat so far, and it is, which of the 62 tornadoes was the most dangerous?
Well, you know, they're all dangerous. I mean, understand that. Every one of those tornadoes was dangerous. Maybe the question is the most violent, the highest wind velocity, the widest. I think there's no doubt the tornado that hit the communities of Hackleburg and Phil Campbell, and I'm talking just Alabama here. You might argue that Smithville, Mississippi was even more violent, but in terms of our state, the tornado that came through Hackleburg, which is in Marion County, Phil Campbell, which is in Franklin County, what was the most violent with the highest wind speeds. The damage there was catastrophic. And this was obviously an EF5, one of the 3 EF5s we had that day that moved through the state. So I think that would be the answer to that. But I will say this, and again, I go back to 1974. I did go to Guin the next day, Guin, Alabama, which was hit by an EF5, which is awfully close to Hackleburg, Alabama. They're in the same county, in Marion County. I honestly think in my life, and I'm old as dirt, the most violent tornado in my lifetime was the Guin tornado, that F5 of April 3rd, 1974. But Hackleburg, Phil Campbell was just brutally violent. And that would have to be the most violent of the event in our state.
Thank you. And then we also have a question from our Facebook live stream. There was some conversation about Coleman County being underserved this morning on your Facebook page. And you mentioned that you go live there when there is a warning there are too many complaints. I've noticed that the Huntsville stations do the same. Why do you think there is a feeling of being underserved there, and what can the weather community do to change that?
That's a great question. It's a complicated answer. And what started that conversation was the fact that this past Wednesday, we had an EF1 tornado that came through Fairview, which is a wonderful community. I've been to Fairview High School so many times, but there was no warning. And listen, the meteorologists at the National Weather Service in Huntsville are the best, world class. I don't care if you're world class, you're going to miss one from time to time. There's no way that, and you look back on it, you can see a couple of volume scans where there was a beware and you had a couplet there, but there was no warning. It was down for 7 minutes. And like I say, the April 27, 2011, those suckers, a third grader could see those radar signatures. But with that, it's just impossible. And so that's what started the conversation. I wrote a post about, there was no warning and kind of explained what happened, and a reminder that there's going to be a few where there's no warning. This is not the first time. It's not going to be the last time. But there was a conversation about Cullman County. And for those that are not from Alabama, that's about halfway between Huntsville and Birmingham. And it's complicated because Cullman County is served by the National Weather Service in Huntsville. It's in their CWA, the county warning area, but the county's in the Birmingham DMA, designated market area, the television market. And so people, number one, that's confusing because people, our weather comes from Huntsville, but I can't get them Huntsville channels. Well, you're supposed to watch Birmingham television. It doesn't matter where the warnings come from. They could come from Walla Walla, Washington. We see them just like everybody else. But there's some perception that the county is underserved, and I don't know why. I did a quick database search this morning, and I'm a numbers guy. I mean, I just like to look at actual data. And there have been 234 tornado warnings for Cullman County or a part of Cullman County since the 1st of September, 1996, when I've been at this current TV station. That's when they let me out of my cage. They gave me the freedom to go on TV anytime I wanted to. I've got full control. I never had that before 1996, but since then, 25 years, I've had that. So the number of tornado warnings for the county, 234. And every single time, 234 times, I'd cut off programming, go on television and do continuous, aggressive, severe weather coverage for Cullman County. And yet there's this perception that they're underserved. I don't understand that. And, it's something I'm not mad. I'm just trying to let people know that you're not really underserved. You've got the world-class meteorologist at the National Weather Service in Huntsville doing the warnings. And like Huntsville television, Birmingham television is a great market, and we're very aggressive. And I'm just talking, you might not like me, which is fine, but boy, we got some other great meteorologists at the other channels here, and you might want to watch them, but you will be taken care of. And that's the one thing about living here. Let me just say this too. I've got, and I don't want to start calling off names here, but I've got a lot of friends that work in the television weather business. They're meteorologists, professionals that work in television in Huntsville and in Birmingham. This state is blessed to have these two markets here because the station management folks have given the freedom to do what we do, and everybody, they do it very well. So in my opinion, humble opinion, Cullman County is not underserved. If anything, they might be overserved compared to some other counties in other parts of the country.
We have another question from our chat. How do you manage expectations when comparing events such as last Wednesday to events such as April 27th, 2011, when both events have a similar hype with regard to SPC outlooks, etc.? But obviously April 27th, 2011 is in a different league as to the overall scope and violence of the event when compared to most high-risk outbreaks across Alabama.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to just get everybody you got to be ready. This is a big deal, but at the same time, hey, let's talk about this. Sometimes I like to have a fireside chat with viewers, whether it's on social or on television. And that's the first question you're going to get this past week. Will this be like April 27th? I read on Uncle Joe's Facebag page that it's going to be worse than April 20th. I hate that question. And the obvious answer is no, it's not going to be like April 27, 2011. That deal is generational. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. All it takes is one. If there's one tornado in the whole state, and if that thing comes down your street, guess what? That's your April 27. So we have to take all these things seriously. But here's the other thing I like to communicate is this. Even on April 27, 2011, only a tiny, tiny, tiny segment of people in the state were affected. The biggest day in probably your generation, the odds of your house being hit were very, very low. They will always be low. And I do think we have to address people that have a phobia. There are adults that have a genuine phobia, a fear, the anxiety. They might have PTSD issues. They've experienced something in the past, and we have to do a job of remembering that. Instead of getting all hypey and, our arms are waving up and down and you got all this code red emergency stuff, just calmly let them know that the odds of your house being hit are really, really low. Hear the warnings, have a plan, you'll be okay.
We have another question from our Facebook live stream. For violent EF4 to EF5 tornadoes, if you do not have a basement or live in an unsafe structure, do you recommend trying to outrun a tornado? Not when it's on your bumper, but in advance of a warning is given.
Yeah, and that's a valid question. Here's the position on that. If we start looking at those cases, the odds of your house being hit by an EF5 are so low. And I wish I had some numbers to back up what I'm saying here. You just can't worry about that. Your odds of winning the $10 billion lottery are going to be better than that. So we don't want people getting hung up in the fact that your house might be hit by an EF5. Our messaging, it's clear that bathroom, interior room, small room, in the center of the house. I'm afraid if we start, but if it's going to be an EF5, you can't do that. You've got to be underground, or you got to get in your car and drive this direction. I just don't like even messaging that. Wednesday, let me say this too. We had a lot of people that they had, and goodness, I've still got like 2,000 messages I haven't even seen yet. I'm trying to go through this weekend, but I want to get out of here the day before. I want to leave. I want to go somewhere. I want to drive. Where can I drive to get away from this? Chicago, Indianapolis, whatever. The odds are so low. I just tell people you don't need to do that. It's going to be okay. But for an EF5, if you really have anxiety about the possibility of an EF4, EF5, invest in a shelter. Invest in an approved shelter that's rated to an EF5 if that is a real anxiety. But I would never advise people to get in the car and drive even before the event.
We have another question. What do you have for all of those who complain about coverage cutting into shows, i.e. what happened in Dayton, Ohio back in May 2019?
Haters going to hate. That's the thing. You can't live in fear. What I tell everybody in the television business is that you have to do the right thing. You cannot live in fear of some, jabroni in wherever sending you a nasty email. Look, I've been told I should have been aborted by a coat hanger. That's the kind of stuff I get. It's brutal. I don't care. And you have to move past that and do the right thing. And today you can watch any show on a phone or a tablet. That's the nice thing about it. The technology is there where people can do that. And you just forget that and move on and do the right thing. And if you got a tornado warning in a market, you've got to go on the air and you got to stay on the air. Is the hate nasty? Yeah. And I'll say this too. I'm glad to see an emphasis on mental health for practitioners and those that work in television, the National Weather Service, because of the social media world you have to live in. It's not good for your mental health. And if this stuff crawls up in your head, it can really affect people. And it's nasty, especially for women that are in meteorology. It's horrible, but you just got to blow past that and do the right thing, which is go on television.
We have another question that kind of leads off from what you were just talking about. How do you deal with the mental and emotional aspects of your job?
About April 27, 2011, I don't think I ever got off the grid. Back in years and years ago, a big event happens, you hand it off to the newsroom, you can kind of take a day or two and get off the grid and reset. That never happened with me because and like this past week, it never happened because all of these damage pictures and all these amazing videos, thousands of these things, you got to process this. You got to go out in the field and, but I have learned that every once in a while, you just got to put your phone down. You got to put it down. You got to put this stuff down and take a walk in the woods. The greatest thing I can do is take a walk at the TV station in River Chase. I work out at the gym across the street. I'll walk down to the gym, walk out there in that turf field and just walk and breathe some fresh air. Your head starts pounding, you get numb, you're physically exhausted anyway. We don't sleep. And that's the biggest problem I have now leading up to an event like this past week. You are so tired of working nonstop for days, pushing out the information that by the time the event starts, you got nothing left and you're just drained. So anyway, the bottom line is you have to discipline yourself. You have to discipline yourself to where you get away from all these platforms, doodads, devices, television. And for me, it's taking a walk. It's not sleeping. And although I will say I'm a napper, I can sleep 3 minutes and I'm good to go. But it's just taking a walk and getting some fresh air. You have to do that sometimes. And also reach out to somebody else if you need to talk to somebody. Any of us in the weather enterprise are helpful. We're glad to talk. In fact, somebody reached out to me this week that wanted to quit. That's very important in this business. You can't quit. And anyway, so have a friend, get some fresh air, but Sorry I talked so long. I went way past my time, but thank you guys. It was fun.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Spann. It doesn't look like we have any more questions on Facebook Live or in the chat. So, Adam, if you want to wrap us up.
All right, thank you very much, Shelby, and thank you very much, Mr. Spann, for your presentation. Very informative, very insightful, and we had a lot of people attending on Facebook Live as well as this Zoom webinar here. So again, thank you so much for everything you've done here, and we'll wrap up here. For the rest of the day for Rocket City Weatherfest, we will be having a live Skywarn spotter training starting at 2 p.m. You will need to register for that. You can go to our website, which is sites.google.com/uah.edu/Rocket City WXFest, all lowercase. And you can register on the website there for the Skywarn spotter training. We also have a live weather balloon launch run by the Upstorm Student Organization taking place starting at 1 p.m., followed by a tour of our Severe Weather Institute, Radar and Lightning Laboratories, or Swirl Building, along with all of our vehicles. So be sure to check out those there. The live stream for the weather balloon launch and tour will be done on Facebook Live, and the Skywarn spotter training will be taking place via GoToWebinar. And again, the links for those can be found on our website. If you want to reach out to Mr. Spann, if you could show your contact information for anyone out there, if you'd like to contact him or leave it in the chat, feel free to reach out to him, and I'm sure he'll be able to get back to you. So once again, thank you so much, and we hope to see you later on in more of our live events.